To absolutely no one's surprise, the news and discussion around game criticism and how it's all very deeply flawed in nature has surfaced once again in regards to the most recent release, Stalker 2. Which, while in its own right is a pretty decent game from what I've heard, it also sounds like the game is a buggy mess. But of course, it's not actually the fault of the studio, and it has the means to become a very good game with further support, which the game will be receiving now that the studio has moved. But of course, the fact that this game was given a very poor Metacritic score, all because of the fact that it has a few bugs, is leading to the head director of Arcane Studios, when they were working on their top games, being Dishonored and Prey. He has received a lot of backlash given his statements, claiming that people have too much of a reliance on Metacritic scores instead of relying on user scores, and it is stifling any and all kinds of exploration and creativity in the gaming scene. But let's really see what he actually bothered to say. Coming from bounding into the comics, Dishonored and Prey reboot director weighs in on Stalker 2 in preview discourse, criticizes how the Metacritic ecosystem encourages devs to make safe, boring games. It's written by Spencer McCulley. Now I will have one comment. Prey is not a reboot. There was a separate game in 1992 that was titled Prey, but that game is completely separate to 2017 Prey, which is the one that this director had worked on. Those two games are not connected in any way, aside from sharing the name Prey. Now, I also will say I love Prey, although I've never been in it, because after a specific level, if you don't have the right resources, it just stonewalls you. I haven't been able to progress, and I didn't care enough to go back and try again. Dishonored, however, is my favorite game of all time. It is one of the greatest games I've ever played, and I've played it a million times, and I've played a million more. So when this guy speaks up, I have cause to listen. In adding another critical voice to the ongoing discourse surrounding review scores and their influence on the video game industry, Arcane Studios founder Rafael Colantonio, that is one hell of a name, has shared his frustrations with the current Metacritic ecosystem, as he believes it only serves to stifle creativity and push developers into making safe, boring games. Colantonio, who during his tenure at Arcane Studios notably co-directed the first Dishonored and individually helmed Prey, before leaving to open up his new endeavor, Wolfeye Studios. I will have to check them out. Shared his thoughts on the unfortunate reverence that video game developers give to review scores on November 22nd via his personal Twitter account. And of course, people could complain that, oh, he's just salty because he doesn't get good scores or something. Dishonored 1 had a Metacritic score of 88, which is still lower than it should be. And Prey had a Metacritic score of 79, which is probably a bit close to where it actually bothered putting that game. So his scores are actually pretty accurate, and he gets good scores without being enslaved to the scores. Because this game was not a boring game. It was not a stale and copy-paste game. It was something completely different. So I think him being a seasoned veteran of the gaming industry, and the fact that he's had games that are in fact commercial and Metacritic successes, probably points to possibly actually knowing what he's talking about. And as I mentioned, this all came to head when it came to the criticism being leveled against GSC Game World's newly released Stalker 2, which due to the apparent realities of both tight financial deadlines and the studio emergency relocation from Kiev, Ukraine, to Prague in the Czech Republic, following the breakout of the current Russia-Ukrainian war launched in an admittedly rough state. Colantonio blatantly lamented, the Metacritic ecosystem encourages devs to make safe, boring games. As long as a game is polished at launch, you're guaranteed an 80%, no matter how boring the game might be. Meanwhile, Stalker 2 gets a 73 because it's a bit rough on the edges at launch. Unfair, misleading. And while I'm reading through some of the Metacritic reviews for Stalker 2, it is showing that a good number of the negative ones are in fact discussing the tech issues around the game, but one of them even mentioned that the person wrote his review before he actually got to play the game because he was too busy installing a fix patch, which while I agree fix patches are horrible things to force players to install, there are times where it can make exceptions. You know, for instance, if you're trying to actively run away from a war. Another person complained that the game was simply too difficult for them and they couldn't handle the AI, and therefore they gave the game a 70 because it was too hard for them to beat the game. In case you don't hate games journalists enough, most of them do not actually care about video games and most of them are very bad at them. And of course, there's nothing in this tweet that I disagree with. In fact, I think it's usually correct because you can find a whole bunch of, well, bad games that are being given completely incorrect scores because, like he says, they run well. And even games that do not run smoothly at launch getting high scores than they deserve. I mean, Dragon Age The Veilguard got an 82 on Metacritic. Alan Wake 2 got an 89 on Metacritic. Now, I think, though, that this game right here is the one that disproves it, I think this one right here is the one that proves his statement as most as possible, while also working to disprove it. Mortal Kombat 1. A sludge of a game that I spent far too much time defending before realizing, oh shit, I was wrong, this game kind of is shit. And most importantly, this game doesn't run. This game is maybe a 70 at best. You know, the gameplay is fine. I like some of the ideas of it, but the gameplay style is completely broken. Everything is land one safe hit and then do a 50% HP combo that juggles all the time and spends as little meter as possible. Given the fact that most people can do 50% combos without spending a single bar of meter, only using one cameo summon. And then, of course, that's just going fully on the gameplay. What about the performance? Well, it performs like shit. There was a solid 2-month period in which my computer could not run Mortal Kombat 1 because of a patch they put in. It literally could not load the game because of my graphics card, which is a 3050. It was the patch that gave us Omni-Man. I literally could not play the game at all during Omni-Man's launch. I could play for Quan Chi. I love Quan Chi. He's very good in this game too, but not worth the hassle playing. And you know what? It takes 10 minutes to load into a single fight, especially when you're doing conquest mode. You're spending more time walking and loading than you are fighting or getting rewards. It's tedious at best, and it doesn't run for shit. It has horrible performance optimization, and at the same time, it has boring, safe gameplay and a really bad story. That game has no right to get an 83 on Metacritic. It should have been given 70 at best. Now, there are some people who do levy very valid criticisms against Colantonio. For instance, Filthy Casual over at X. If that's the case, then why not just wait and release the game once it's polished? That seems like more a studio problem than a Metacritic/review problem. And well, on the surface, I agree with this point. I don't think this is a valid criticism to levy against Stalker 2. As Rafael Colantonio responds, because often the studio don't have a choice. The game are pushed out the door due to financial realities. If only people knew how hard it is to make games. And well, I generally roll my eyes whenever somebody makes the "you don't know how hard it is to make games" argument, because, well, a lot of people actually do. Now, I would love to have known if Grums had made a statement, but given the fact it's not included, I'm going to assume he didn't. And while I will agree that oftentimes things being forced out too early causes these glitches, I also believe it's a lot of times where either the teams are just not optimized to work on these glitches, are filled with people who have no idea what they're doing, or in the case of Stalker 2, they're literally about to get nuked. Luis G. Bento comments, what a weird thing to complain about. Yes, a game that works is going to have a better score, while the one that doesn't, a lesser score. To which Colantonio responds, a bad game with no bugs is better score than a great game with bugs. Makes sense to you? It means the essence of the game is not taken into consideration. It means that 3 months later, when the great game is patched, it still has shit score. Makes sense to you? The one thing I will agree with there is I do think that if a game has performance issues and those issues are patched, I think it would be a smart thing to go and revise your review, because the last thing you want to be is the person who gave Cyberpunk 2077 a shit review and keep that review when Cyberpunk Code Red came out, because Code Red took a middling good game to an excellent game. But if you kept your review as the middling good game, it's going to massively hurt your credibility as a reviewer. And of course, I do think there is a merit to having the score be completely different based on the technical aspects of it. Where if the game runs horribly to the point you can't play it, like when I couldn't play Mortal Kombat 1 for 2 months, I would have given the game a 0 if I had run into that issue, because the game was literally unplayable. But of course, if it's just that you're going to have some lagging and some crashing from here to there, then I don't see that as being a huge enough issue to justify such a low score. But to say that technical issues should not be taken into consideration into a score, or at least be mentioned during a review, is completely ludicrous. Now, you can argue that maybe Metacritic should add the functioning score as well, so you have the reviewer's opinion of the actual game, and then maybe give them a section to say what they thought about how the game ran, and make that a different score that is irrelevant to the gameplay or story score. Maybe you could do that. John Gordon over at X responded, Metacritic system unfairly encourages developers to release products that are fully finished. To which Colantonio responds, that's not what I said. It encouraged devs to play it safe by making easy games that are easy to polish. As soon as you offer a game with tons of possibilities, you open yourself to harder games to polish at launch. And while that is also true, you should probably work on that as a better system. Don't make a game that you can't complete. You know, if you're going to make a game that you don't have the opportunity to properly make run, it's probably not a good idea to make that game in the first place if you don't know if you'll be able to make a working product. But of course, as I pointed out, they've put high scores on games that weren't released properly, that didn't have good release and ran like crap, and games that are completely uninspired at the same time. Yes, I would much rather a game with some lagging issues than a game that is boring and a duplicate of other games, but there comes a point where the game just gets too laggy and it's unplayable, and I would rather my games be playable than innovative. Another user, Red Herrings, responded with, on one hand, yes. On the other, I think game scores should be lowered for bugs and performance issues on launch until it's fixed, so devs actually fix their games. And I will agree with that there. Maybe if you put it as a temporary score, due to technical issues, the score has been lowered by X points, so that in your review, and that if they ever get patched and you see that they've been patched, you remove that reduced score and you up the score. But the thing is, as Colantonio points out, except that once the issues are fixed, it's too late. The old scores are permanent and they don't reflect the actual quality of the game. And that's true. There is no way for the reviewers to go back in and re-review the game to remove the punishments for poor performance. But saying that he accidentally kicked off the X-Hive, he decided to make another statement to cover his ass a little bit. My previous post was a bit controversial. Hopefully this one will be received better. 70% on Metacritic can either mean it's a mediocre game or it's an amazing game that has bugs at launch and needs patching. I don't think Metacritic helps in making the difference between the two. Which is a completely valid point. In fact, it is the most valid point made in this article. It'd be one thing if Metacritic actually made it very clear what the difference was in their different kind of scores, but as you can see on here, I'm not seeing anything that's saying what the issue is. Now, of course, there's an easy way around that. You don't just look at the number. In fact, any person who just looks at the number and makes a decision solely on the number is an idiot. For instance, Black Myth Wukong, which by all measures probably should have been a much higher score, 85 to a 90, based on the actual realities of the game, but due to the unjust narrative around the reviews, the game got a lower score than it deserved. Now I hear what you're saying, Arza Chats, how can you say that when the user score isn't that high? Don't you see all the very low reviews? Well, the problem with the reviews is the negative reviews are wrong. They're just people whinging because they don't actually have any issue with the actual game. Whereas this 0 score review, the game is nothing. No normal story, no gameplay, all the hype is created only by Chinese players. The game itself is not interesting in the Western world. This is not Dark Souls or Elden Ring. Never said it was. It never was designed to be. Most of these reviews down here are clearly lying to people about how they actually feel about the game. Now, of course, Colantonio is not the only person who's gone out and spoken up against a lot of the issues with the Metacritic system, as the gaming developer Goichi Suda51 Suda shared his opinion that recent decline in experimental or boundary-pushing video games like his was caused by the simple fact that everybody pays too much attention to and cares too much about Metacritic scores. It's gotten to the point where there's almost a set formula. If you want to get a high Metacritic score, this is how you make the game, he said. If you've got a game that doesn't fit into that formula, that markability scope, it loses points on Metacritic. The bigger companies might not want to deal with that kind of thing. That might not be the main reason, but that's certainly one reason why. Everyone cares too much about the numbers. Personally, I don't care too much about the Metacritic numbers, Suda affirmed. I'm not really conscious of them. What's important to us is putting the game out that we want to put out and having people playing the games we want them to be able to play. Suda continues on, there are people who give the game we make scores like 0 or 20. I think 0 can't possibly be a fair score, but studios like ours who make games that disregard standard forms of expression and standard mechanisms often fall through the cracks when it comes to reviews. And when things are like that, there's really no point being concerned about scores given by the media, he continued. Instead, it's user reviews that are important. I want to know if the gamers who went out of the way to buy our new game and had fun playing it, if they thought it was good or not. That's actually constructive for us. I think it's no use trying to get 100 from someone who gave you a 0. And that is completely true. The media is completely useless. As we all know, games journalists, sites like PC Gamer, Kotaku, The Gamer, IGN, they're all completely and utterly ideologically captured to the point where they don't give two shits about video games. I'm willing to bet that only like 2 people who work at Kotaku have ever actually bothered to play a real video game, and most of them on here don't know how. If you remember the Cuphead tutorial debacle, where a single game journalist couldn't figure out how to jump and dash at the same time to defeat the tutorial, it took him almost 20 minutes to beat the tutorial of Cuphead. Games journalists are not the people who are buying the games. In fact, most games journalists get the games for free. With even the person on Twitter who goes by the name The Positivity Peddler, I don't remember his actual name, my apologies, and I couldn't find the tweet, but where he said that he would love to review Tales of Kinzaru Zhao, but refused to actually pay for the game until someone actually gave him a code. Because, of course, these people, they don't support what they claim to support. They're the legitimate grifters who will just do whatever they can for free. And those are the people propped up by the media. They're the people who are considered games journalists, and when in reality all they are legitimate grifters trying to get a free product for a game that they probably will never even bother playing. So it is absolutely of zero value to listen to anything that the game journalists or major reviewers have to say, when instead you should listen to people who actually enjoy video games, people who actually play games for fun, and people who review games for the hell of it, for people who actually want good games. And also, Stalker did put out an official message from GSC Game World team to inform people about some of the issues regarding Stalker 2. Dear Stalkers, it feels utterly surreal to say that, but Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl is out now. That's totally wild. So was the whole development story. Despite all the odds, it's here. Our biggest game, our own story, our love letter to Ukraine. After more than 15 years, the doors to the zone are open once again. This is a very important, very exciting, and very memorable day for all of us. Stalker is meaningful in its own way for each fan. We hope those who have been familiar with the universe for a long time will immediately feel at home and recognize that very same Stalker. For all newcomers, we hope you'll immerse yourselves in the magical, alien, and all-powerful zone, and feeling its unique emotion will stay with us for a long time. This is a product of endless love and passion from the entire team. We genuinely believe that this is felt throughout. You'll feel it in the handcrafted world, you feel it in the laboratory and in the poppy fields, or during the first mission, or intense battle with a bloodsucker, or the stylish reload of your new gun, or first seeing Pripyat under the moonlight. There are so many things in the game that we are incredibly proud of. Nevertheless, Stalker 2 is a massive game. We understand that such a game, there may still be rough edges. We literally haven't released anything of this scale before. We're absolutely committed to being here, monitoring your feedback, and quickly fixing any issue that need our attention. In the first day after release, we'll be working with hotfixes, rolling them out as precisely as possible, but as frequently as we can. Then we'll switch to a larger update that includes constant improvements. There will also be free in-game content. We'll share its roadmap later in December. We have big plans for Stalker Universe. In a way, today is both a return and the beginning of a brand new journey. We're blessed to have you before, we're blessed to have you now. The zone belongs to you, have fun. Which is a pretty solid statement to make in regards to all of this, though it doesn't mention as much about how bad a lot of the bugs are. Though of course I haven't actually seen any of these bugs, but I heard that it's pretty rough. But I'm not too certain what you expect from a studio that, like I said, is literally in the middle of a war, literally just escaped the war zone, and was dealing with the fact that they were, having bombs dropped around them while they were in development of the game, to the point that they actually lost one of their developers to a strike from Russia. And well, yes, I'm super tired of games being released in a buggy state and then being patched as the years go on, to the point where by the time the game is actually in a playable state, you don't care anymore. You're tired of waiting, and you've moved on from the game. That always sucks, but there are times where I'm willing to give a little bit of a leeway to people who have to do that because, well, they have no choice. And of course, it is paramount that game studios stop listening to critics, because critics don't know what they're talking about. They don't play games, they don't enjoy playing games, and all they want to do is mess with people who actually do enjoy games. They're people who want to shove their politics into whatever they're doing and not actually discuss the reality of what's going on in these games. But that's pretty much all I got. Let me know down in the comments whether or not you guys think that Colantonio is correct, that game studios have too much of a reverence to Metacritic scores and are far more interested in making safe, functioning games that'll get a high score instead of making dangerous games that may or may not be able to run properly but push the letter and risk getting a lower score. But that's pretty much what I got, so I will see you guys on the next one.